So it's 11, whenever you feel comfortable getting started.
We can close that door since there's too much noise
Yes.
coming in. Okay. Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming early Sunday morning. It was my specific request to have 11 o'clock. I volunteer in the community a lot, and that is what this conversation is about this morning. Unfortunately, I have another commitment at 1:30 in Northern Virginia, so that is why we are all talking at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. So we are talking about careers and community volunteering. And today I have someone that has volunteered with me a lot, Doug Monroe. Doug is a director of recruiting, VP of recruiting. Some of the companies that he has been with has been Veris, ATD, Coalfire, most recently with MAG Aerospace. So we're talking about someone with a wealth of experience, not only in recruiting, but also in being involved in the community. I myself have been in this community about 8 years. I volunteer for about 16 different BSides and women in cybersecurity groups. In addition to that, I direct the career track for 3 other BSides, and I'm on the staff for BSides Las Vegas. I run their higher ground. So I might know a little bit about this community and volunteering and what it impacts on the careers. And as I had been doing the volunteering, I was observing several of my colleagues who were volunteering, and then I was also noticing that they were gaining various different skills. But in addition to those skills, they were progressing in their career. They were moving on to higher and higher different positions. They were able to take on things that were much more exciting. And so I noticed that there's parallel between community volunteering and development of career skills and the development of career goals. So last year, the company that I'm with, cybersecjobs.com, we actually did a survey of the community and asked people who were volunteering to answer some questions about their volunteering, their employer support, the things that they learned, and we put this together in a results paper, which we have right now. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So one of the things that we noticed was that more than 50% of the volunteers in the survey gave 8 or more hours of their time per month. But I personally know so many volunteers who think that 8 hours is a big number and they're not really reporting that correctly. I would say that more people give between 16 and 20 hours a week. And when we looked at the demographics of this study, these were not people who were straight out of college. These were people who were actually 10 to 20 years into their career, had full-time jobs, and also had families. So it was very interesting to see these people who already had very full lives were also taking on additional volunteering support. We also found that people tended to not only volunteer at one group, but they took their skills and they applied them to other groups. One thing we found about community volunteers is that they really have a difficulty saying no. They really have a difficult time hearing that another group needs AV support or registration help, and they would quickly say, oh, well, I do that for this other group. I'll quickly do it for yours as well. Thus, we see a lot of burnout in this community. We asked many of the volunteers what were the skills that they learned while they were doing community volunteering. And one thing that you will hear a lot in any of the studies that talk about soft skills, that talk about skills needed for your career advancement, they'll always talk about the soft skills. They always talk about those skills that we really don't have a certification process for, we don't really have a class for. These are things that need to be learned on the job. And these are the skills that people said that they learned from community volunteering. Teamwork, organization, planning, and most importantly, communication. What was fascinating to me, I was really glad to see this, is that a lot of people were very upfront with the fact of how stressful volunteering was. It wasn't only that it was the anxiety of doing a good job, there was physical stress, there was all of this stress about, I need to get it all done, I need to take care of my family, I need to get my job done. But they all said it was fulfilling. They all said that this was something that they would continue to do because they found the personal fulfillment in the community volunteering that they didn't necessarily see in their jobs. And that is what a lot of us are sort of striving for. I hear frequently people saying, my corporate job is eating my soul, I need to find something else. My recommendation is always, do more volunteering. If you need something that feeds your soul, really go and do volunteering rather than expecting that from your job. Because that is a high order for an employer to fill that job of personal fulfillment. That is your responsibility. So when you're looking at community volunteering, there are a lot of things that you really need to ask questions of yourself. Because too many times people will do community volunteering without doing sort of the analysis of, is this something that's going to provide me benefit, or is this something that's going to totally burn me out? So one is, are you going to have time? You know, are you going to have that 8 to 16 hours a month to do it? Are you going to have the time for the conference calls at 10 o'clock at night, or the all-day meeting to do the agenda planning? Really looking at your time. Do you have the skills? Now, you don't have to have specific skills to go in and do volunteering, but understand where you're good in skills and where there are skills that you need to have. Do you have the resources to be involved? Do you have childcare? Do you have transportation? A lot of people think that they can only do volunteering if they can drive to a con, when there are many organizations. Matt Duran in the back of the room is one who works with me on BSides Las Vegas. 90% of our time is online. So being precluded from being part of a staff of an organization that's maybe across the country, you only need to go there once, but all of the pre-planning, all of the organization, all of the communication happens online and ahead of time. Also, are you going to be able to involve your employer? And this is something that I want Doug to sort of chime in on. What would you do? How would you recommend someone involve their employer if you're going to be doing volunteering?
Just make them aware. Go up through your chain of command, let them know what you're thinking about, what you'd like to participate in. In some cases, what you'll find is that your employer will want to like to participate as well. And they might go as far as sponsorship, but certainly from an employer's perspective, you volunteering at an event like this, for example, it just indicates a passion for the work. It indicates an interest in the community, a desire to be a part of something bigger than just your individual day-to-day work. And so approaching your employer and just letting them know, this is a conference I'd like to volunteer in, this is what I'd like to do for them. That's enough. Just make them aware. And then we'll be talking more later about the different layers of that, when you can get into presenting, participating in competitions, things of that nature. But just letting your employer know. I have not ever worked for an employer who didn't get excited about the fact that people working for them were doing something. And you might very well get some financial support for the organization. Only good things come of it.
And also realize that just like any project you get involved in, more than likely you're going to find out that it takes more time to do than you thought, and being flexible. Also, if it becomes too much, being honest with yourself and going to the leadership of the organization and saying, look, this is much more than I thought it was going to be. I either need help or we need to find a replacement. Because too many stories have happened in the con community where someone didn't think the job would take as much time as it did. It did. They did a poor job, which burned their reputation. And then at the end, the organization is sort of left handing, what am I going to do next? Also, who to work for. A lot of us are talking about con involvement, but you might want to say that there is, something associated with your child's school, there's something associated with your church, there's something else. It doesn't necessarily have to be one of the conferences. While this is something that a lot of us are involved in, it is something that you want to find personal fulfillment with. It's also something that you're going to have time to do. So it may be, as simple as being the treasurer of your school group, or, Boy Scouts or something. Some way that you're being able to get back into the community. Or are you trying to increase your network so that you can expand your professional network? There may be key people you want to work with. There have been several groups where I've wanted to work alongside of maybe Jack Daniel or Banshee or somebody who was part of the national scene, and I worked my way up to make sure that I had an opportunity to work with them because I found them very inspiring for myself. Are you trying to gain new skills? A lot of us go to volunteering and I'll go and I'll say I'm really good at marketing or at organizing events, but there are certain skills that I need and I need sort of a playground to play with it. I'll go in and I'll say I don't know a lot about Instagram or Facebook. I want to be that lead person because I want to teach myself how to gain those skills and be able to be a benefit to the organization. And then finally, are you that person that can provide critical skills? A lot of organizations are full of passion and they're full of grassroots energy, but they don't know about organization. They don't know about tax payments. They don't know about going out and getting sponsorship. They don't know about specific things that really make an organization run. Do you have those skills that you can bring to the organization? I had one organization that wanted to put on several events, but no one on their group knew how to negotiate contracts with hotels, knew how to put together a sponsorship package. They said, we'll just copy somebody else's. I said, no, it's more than just putting on something with a really good theme. You have to think of the down, dirty, logistics. So, Doug, talk to us a little bit about, we have a lot of people in the room who have been part of various different volunteering groups. Do you want to see in a resume or a LinkedIn profile scobs and scobs of information, or what do you want to see in a resume and a LinkedIn profile about volunteering in the community?
In the recruiting community, we're definitely interested in seeing that community involvement on your part. It can get a little overwhelming, and if you've got too much information, it can detract slightly from your overall profile. So the idea is to cherry pick. What's specific to your career? Because when you're putting together a resume or a LinkedIn profile, that's all about your career. So specifically, what are the highlights? Where did you feel you had the most impact or you learned the most? So focus on those. If you've got 2 pages of them on your resume, probably not a good thing. But if you've got half a dozen of the key things that you participated in, that's going to be a positive. And it's going to be something you can speak to when you get into interviews. Again, we're looking at it as the whole person. And I can tell you that you read a lot about how there's a cybersecurity talent shortage. To a degree, there's some truth to it. There's certainly stovepipes that are underrepresented. But I can tell you from looking at 100, 200 resumes a day at some points, there are a lot of people with cybersecurity experience in various different areas of the industry. What is sorely lacking, unfortunately, are consulting abilities. Because in the end, maybe if you're working in a SOC, you're working on hardware, that can be sort of an isolated experience. But everything else is services. And those consulting abilities, the ability to communicate to a broad audience, the ability to lead a team, the ability to present to an audience that may not be terribly technically savvy, that is huge. And the experience you can gain from participating in these conferences and these events, that's what it speaks to, is your ability to work as part of a team, collaborate, perhaps lead something, perhaps present, and all of those soft skills are vital. I don't need somebody who can slap together a server. And I've got thousands of people I can pick up to do that. I need somebody who can represent my company as a consultant, be that expert in the room, talk to anybody, and finish a project to the satisfaction of that customer. And everything that you do at events like this is a contributor to that. So when I see it on a resume, I get excited.
Now, are you looking for specific roles? Because one thing that I see when I look at a resume or a LinkedIn profile, someone will say, I gooned in DEF CON. Well, most people outside of this community don't know what gooning is. So you need to be very specific. I assisted with logistics. I assisted or supported or led security. You need to be sort of that educator to the recruiter or the hiring manager as to exactly what this means. Now, again, not putting in scobs and scobs of reports, but say, I would put in director of higher ground for the last 4 years, secured sponsorship, curated content, and recruited volunteers. that shows to initiative, planning, program completion, and going out into the community. So you want to take those business skills that you have learned in your volunteering and making sure that you have them on your resume and LinkedIn profile. So getting down a little bit more into the weeds here as far as what we're talking about. Con management. A lot of the people that I have worked with in the community really started as the person who folded the t-shirt, all of a sudden became the registration desk, then all of a sudden became the lead for registration, then went on to being part of the national organization and doing registration, and then maybe going on to be the board. So looking at being part of con management as a business development, sort of you're part of the business, you're looking to see how it's run, you want to see how you can, go to the next step. A lot of people say, well, I just like doing this one thing. That's fine. But if you're also looking at your own personal career, wanting to move to the next level, but you need to gain those skills to get to the next level, you might want to look at con management, because it is a way of addressing all of the same things that you would be addressing in a business. Resource allocation, workforce management, conflict resolution. I mean, a lot of us are very uncomfortable with conflict resolution, but I can tell you when you're part of a conference, there are going to be some times when there's conflict, and you can address the fact of, are you comfortable being able to do that? And if you're not, what are the skills that you can work on with it? You also have to be careful when you're part of con management that you're clear as to what your role is. Because a lot of us, specifically women, try to do everything. We try to make sure that everything is taken care of. We try to make sure that even though our job is taking care of the agenda, we will go in and we will try to work on registration and making sure that there's coffee or making sure that the t-shirts are folded. You need to make sure what your role is, what your goal is personally for that role, and what the organization is expecting of you. You also need to understand that you may have been in that role for a while, like 10 years, and it's time to move on. So you need to also practice what is a really great way to gracefully move to the next level. This is something that is never taught in school or any organization. More often than not, we get frustrated and we burn a bridge. How do you create a transition file? How do you make sure that the people who are going to come in behind you know exactly what to do? And how do you prepare the organization that you are no longer going to be the person that they call anytime there's something wrong with AV? In the military, it's called a transition book. You sort of have a book and it's handed over to the next person and they know exactly what to do. So using the con management as a way to be able to say, this is my role, it's time for me to move on, how do I transition? Because that will really benefit you in your professional career. When you're looking to move on, you need to be the person that says, I need to prepare my organization for my transition, I have to prepare my relief, and I also have to prepare myself. And also, let's talk a little bit about con management is year-long. How would I talk to my employer about being involved in a con?
It goes back to the same thing, being open and honest and explaining what it is, what your role, what the con is going to be, what the expectation of time commitment is going to be, and making clear that it's not going to impact your work, but also emphasizing the skills that you're trying to develop by participating in the con in this role. And as Kathleen said, it can be something simple. I just want to be a part of the team that greets, that makes the welcoming experience at BSides Charm. I want to, as you progress, I want to be in charge of that team. But being able to relate those things to your employer and say, these are the goals that I have to get out of it. I'm not just going there to get a t-shirt. I'm going because I have a tangible skill that I'm looking to develop that very clearly is going to benefit my employer as well.
And, it's also something to engage in if you're interviewing for a new job, letting them know, look, I do this other thing in the community. A lot of us who are involved with anything at Vegas, from DEF CON to BSides Las Vegas to Black Hat, we let our employers know like 6 months ahead of time. There's about 10 days the first part of August that I'm going to be out, and then the week afterwards I'm going to be sleeping. So you may want to let them know I'm going to have all of my projects done, all of my commitments done before I go, and then meet with them about 2 months beforehand and say, okay, again, I'm going to be gone 2-3 weeks the first part of August. That's right before Q4. What are we looking at? That shows your employer you're thinking about management, you're thinking about planning, you're organizing. You're not just sort of saying, my flight leaves in 2 hours, goodbye. You're not leaving them in the lurch. But that, again, shows them management experience. So competitions. You might not necessarily see competitions as volunteering, but I see them as being part of the community. And I really think it's a way that you can also be part of the community, but also learn skills. So, talk about, going for a competition and some of the work experience you think that people gain from competitions.
Typically, in the scenarios that I've been exposed to the most, it's CTFs. So you're typically going to be in a team, maybe 3 or 4 people. So that, again, speaks back to teamwork, collaboration, role definition. And it is absolutely, it's a skills development. How do I apply the skills that I already have and hopefully elevate them? And certainly if you're collaborating with 3 or 4 other people, you're going to elevate your skills. They're going to know things that you don't. Very often what happens in these scenarios is that midway through, somebody drops out. So now I have the opportunity to redefine the team. And how did you do that? And experiences like that go to what's everybody's favorite interview question that gets posed in 50 different ways. Tell me about a time when. Well, there you go. You may have something in your professional experience, but you can also use the experience you have in these competitions, even again, going back to the volunteering at events. Something unforeseen arose, and this is how you handle it. Because it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-to-one, this was in a pen testing competition. This was an event, a problem arose, this is how I dealt with it. And the same skills apply, whether it is in a technical role or something event management or whatever.
So I always recommend when someone's looking at switching into another career or looking to expand their professional network, I really encourage them to look at competitions. There's cyber policy competitions, there's Wi-Fi hacking villages, there's car hacking. There are different ways where you can expand your network because you're in an environment where you're having to work closely with people, but you're also getting those skills that Doug was talking about. And what's interesting is that a lot of people go into the competition, they want to win, and then they go and have a beer. Really, when you're looking at a competition, I recommend you start just a journal page about the competition, and you say, this is what I expect going into this, 2 or 3 lines. Then you get into the competition, and you're, as Doug said, someone dropped out, or something happened unexpectedly, and you had to pull resources and work on that. And then you finished, maybe you won, maybe you came in third. Take 5-10 minutes afterwards on your phone, in your notebook, write down what happened, because as Doug said, you're going to get some of those questions during your interview process that say, well, when did you learn something? When did you fail? And a lot of times you can't talk about what you do in your own work. Having that other example from somewhere in a competition is a really great way of being able to share your management skills, but also your technical skills. So presenting. I always find it fascinating when people come up and say, oh, you present all the time, it's no problem, and you get picked all the time. Presenting is an entirely different, ball of wax when we're talking about community volunteering. What I really love about this community is it's not people who are handpicked. We are all people who have to submit proposals and then make sure that we have a good enough case for the content committee to be able to pick you. Then you have to prepare your presentation, and then you have to get yourself to the conference, and then you have to make sure that you have all the technical stuff available. So it is really very important when you're considering presenting that you think on a long-term timeline. A lot of times when someone is putting out a call for proposals, it's anywhere from 6 months to a year ahead of the conference. You also then have to be very technically proficient to know how to fill out the submission. It can be everything from EasyConf, Google Forms, easy chair. There is no one universal conference proposal submission systems out there. If you want to know one that's a good one to train on so that you know how to practice, look at the Grace Hopper proposal submission. It is 8 parts, it is 12 pages long, and it is bigger than Black Hat or RSA as far as a proposal submission outline to do. So that is a really good one to work on. And any of the material that you use for that, for any one talk, you then have content ready to be able to cut and paste into any other proposal. But also understanding, learning with rejection. You know, a lot of us don't like to be rejected. And I can't tell you how many proposals I've submitted that have been rejected. More than I would like to say. And I always take it personally. And it's not that. It's not that it's personal. It is that I did not present my case well enough, or that someone else presented their case better than I did, and they had better content for that specific conference. So just understanding it's a numbers game. You have to keep submitting. You have to keep making sure that your proposals are really good. The one thing that people rarely do is ask for feedback. I actually submitted to ISC Squared for their most recent conference, and out of 300 submitters, I was the only one that asked for feedback. I know that because the guy sent me and he goes, "You were the only one that requested feedback." And he gave me some very concrete feedback. And what's interesting is I'm on content review committees for proposals in various different conferences, and I always give a thumbs up, thumbs down. I now know better. I know how important it is to the person submitting the proposal, how they like what we've submitted, and getting that feedback. So I try to take more time in doing that. It's also building the confidence. I can tell you I present 3 times a month, have done so for the last 12 years. I still get nervous. I still wonder if, you know, there's going to be a fire alarm, which has happened in the middle of my presentation. If the electricity is going to go out, which has happened in my presentation. If there's going to be a bomb threat, yes, that's happened during my presentation, and you just get used to it. But talk to me about how this can show in an interview to your employer, to a recruiter. Would they like the fact that I present 3 times a month?
To be honest, it's going to depend on the employer if you're presenting at that volume. But to be equally honest, very few people present that often.
I'm a masochist.
But she's a natural. So I wouldn't be terribly concerned about that. If you find yourself to be that popular and able to manage the processes that effectively, it won't necessarily be a negative, but obviously if you are that busy and we're employing you for 40 hours a week, there would be a concern. But to present a few times a year, again, it just speaks to all the positives. Because typically your employer is going to have at least a general sense of the work that goes into preparing that presentation, that proposal. The fact that there's a numbers game, that you undoubtedly had some rejected and had to take the lessons learned and apply those to your next submission. So in general, there's really no downside. And that experience, again, when I talked about consulting skills, it's not just being able to stand up in front of a room full of people and tell them about the project you're working on, describe next steps, what have you. It is the ability to the written word. It's a lost art. So the more times you have to put, finger to keyboard and put together a proposal, the better writer you're going to be, the more concise. It's a technical writing exercise. And the more you do it, the better at it you get. And that is absolutely applicable to the work that you're doing. I can almost guarantee it. There are precious few people that get away with not having to write a report about something. So all the skills apply, and short of the 3 times a month, I don't think you got anything to worry about.
But what's also interesting is that you have to decide if this is something that you are going to let your employer know that you are doing. I know a lot of people who present in the community, and they make sure that where they work, who they work for, even their name that they work under is not part of the proposal. You have to decide, knowing your internal culture of your company, if they're going to be supportive of this or not. I was mentoring someone on doing proposals, and I was very happy that she actually gave herself a goal of presenting 12 times in 1 year. She actually worked for a Fortune 50 company, and she knew that she had to go through the process of getting approval for every single one of the submissions. She had to get approval of the material that she submitted. She had to make sure that the images were, conducive to the brand of the company. But they also paid for her travel to Brazil, to Spain, to anywhere in the country, and they paid for all of her expenses and got her paid time off. So you have to decide what the trade-off is, because a lot of times if you say, I want to present at this conference, I actually had one of my speakers had to pull out for the Diana Initiative because her employer said, no, we're not paying for that travel to Vegas. So you have to decide, okay, do you have your own wherewithal to drive, fly to those various different conferences, or do you want to ask your employer to do that? And that is a constant question that you will be talking with your management about. And that's how you build the rapport with your manager. Not like, I don't want to do overtime again or something like that. Let's talk about my career. These are the things that I am doing to further my career. These are the things I am doing to learn my technical skills and my soft skills and my leadership skills. And if they're not supportive of that, then that's maybe time when you start building that network and find something else. So we also found that from the community survey, more than 41%, 42% of the survey participants really said, I can only do it the day of the event. And I just wanted to put this in here because when you see all of these phenomenal volunteers around at Charm, a lot of them were just here for today or here just yesterday. They weren't doing the annual sort of preparation. You still learn those valuable skills coming for just the day of the event. You still learn resource management. You still learn leadership. You still learn how to be that problem solver or that conflict resolution person. You still learn those skills and getting that personal fulfillment. So if you don't have the time to be able to do something year-long, but you only have time to do it one day up, I can tell you that it is absolutely phenomenal to those of us who have been working all year to have that new, vibrant energy that comes in the day before the event, and you've been dreading folding all those t-shirts, and there are 5 very excited people ready to fold t-shirts, and you're like, oh, thank you. So it's great teamwork. So if you can only do the day of the event, don't think it's not a good thing. Just say, I will always be there the last Saturday of April to make sure that registration happens for BSides Charm, and I know many of the organizers would be happy. What I also wanted to remind everyone is that there are many different ways to find a job, but the one that has always been the top has been referrals within your network. We were just helping a few people this morning with some referrals. So understanding that if you're going to be looking for a job or you want to keep your ear open to other jobs, you have to have an expanded network. But if you have that same group of people that you've always moved from one group to the other or one employer to the other, you're not expanding your network. You are not expanding your opportunities to connect with other people. So using the volunteering to work with different people, have connections, be professional, follow up with them, make sure you're connected with them on some social media so that if you needed to put feelers out, we were trying to help someone earlier who wants to find a job in a particular company. I happen to know them. We did introductions. So it's still about those personal interactions and those personal introductions. So definitely use volunteering to build your network. There are so many negative things we hear about our industry. No matter what you look at, you will always see something negative about our industry. And the one thing that I loved when we saw this as a result in the survey was that 94% of the people involved in any kind of volunteering felt that they were having a positive impact on our industry. How many things can you say in this community make a positive impact? We hear about the negative impact, we never hear about the positive impact. Doug and I are involved in recruiting and other communities, and I can tell you there is not as much of a volunteering ethos in those other communities as there is in this one. So I really take this to heart that we feel positive about being involved with all these organizations. Just wanted to sort of highlight again the skills that a lot of people saw when they did volunteering, be it one day, be it all year long. 81% felt that they had better teamwork skills. And there is rarely an opportunity within employment that you are going to not have to work with a team, that you're going to be a sole contributor. Most of the work that's done is definitely through teamwork. Being able to organize, being able to see the end goal and developing the steps to get there is one thing that a lot of people saw through presenting, having to do all of the proposals, and con management. It's not just about making sure we have sponsors and we have something going on for Saturday night. It is everything from Eventbrite all the way through to making sure that there's coffee on the last day. That's organizing, that's planning. 74% saw planning. So if you're meeting with a client and you don't know how to get that project in on time, being part of a conference that you have to do the management of, we're going to pack 1,300 people into the Sheraton North, April 2019, how are we going to get that happen? And then finally, communication skills. A lot of us are not very comfortable working on our communication skills. We're comfortable talking with people that we're familiar with. We're comfortable talking with people over social media. But actually having that face-to-face conversation, being able to talk to someone about, I need you to get something done and we're all relying on it, those are the communication skills that we are slowly losing. So using volunteering as an opportunity of being able to make eye contact, make sure someone understands what you're saying, and making sure that they can deliver what you need them to deliver. These are all skills gained by community volunteering. What was also interesting is, again, the stress. And I really have to spend a lot of, and I do spend a lot of time, coaching people on how to say no. And it's really understanding that if you don't know how to say no in your volunteering, you are probably not able to say no in other parts of your life, specifically work. Specifically, I need to get that paycheck, I need to get certain benefits. I'm still going to do that work that I don't want to do. I'm going to take on another work trip. I'm going to take on more things. And before you know it, you've burnt yourself out, you're overwhelmed, and you just quit for no apparent reason because you can't take it anymore. People do the exact same thing in volunteering. So I say, look at what you're doing in volunteering, and you may find a very close resemblance to you doing that also in your professional life. Use being able to ease yourself out of one role and moving into a next, gaining those skills, is something that you're going to be able to do in your professional life. Because none of us like to leave one job and move on to the other, but it speaks volumes to be able to move with grace and professionalism from one organization to the next. Being able to create a turnover file. I can't tell you how many times I've created a turnover file and it has made me appreciate the involvement I've had with an organization, but also my employer has appreciated that, wow, I did a lot and they didn't know about it. We're actually doing that with BSides Las Vegas right now, making sure that we all have our transition files. Doug, do you see people who just sort of burn bridges and don't move on gracefully, and how does that impact their career if they burn a bridge and everyone knows about it?
Well, sadly, we do see it, and it's almost invariably unnecessary. But to Kathleen's point, if you see that something isn't working for you, you have to communicate it. But the burning bridges, obviously there are tens of thousands of people who work in this community, nationally and internationally for that matter. And yet it's a tiny little community. And so if you leave a negative impression, there's a strong likelihood that somebody in the next opportunity that you seek is going to know you or know of you. And I do a lot of hiring in military, and most recently we hired pilots. They're all working in Afghanistan or in Colombia, and they could have all the requisite flight hours. They could have all the requisite certifications to pilot this aircraft, but they're going to have to spend 60, 90 days in austere conditions next to somebody else. And so if they're not liked, if somebody remembers, hey, this guy overslept and blew a mission, that's going to come back, and they're going to be hard-pressed to get employed. So transitioning gracefully should be an easy thing, but there are folks who ignore that. And something else that Kathleen touched on in terms of the difficult communications you have, some of those are, I have to say no to this. Ask for help, ask for mentorship. That's another wonderful thing about community events like this. There's going to be somebody, especially when you're first getting started and doing it, who's in a more robust role, who's the overall organizer rather than a team member. Ask them how they do these things. How did you organize this event? How did you decide how many people were going to be at what station? And specific to this conversation, if I get to the point where I'm not going to be able to meet my commitment, how do I let somebody know that? So seek out the mentorship. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So by all means, get the information from the people that have it.
What was also interesting is finding out how much employers supported people who were volunteering in the community. So it was fascinating to find out that almost 80% of the people in the survey actually had employers who supported their efforts. So I was actually having a Twitter conversation about this the other day, is that people were saying, oh, you know, I don't tell my employer that I volunteer, I don't think they'll support. I pointed them to the survey. 80% of the people who are out there who are involved in the community actually have their employers involved with supporting them. It's either sponsorship, it's giving, the number one benefit was being paid time off to be able to do this. So let them know that this is an industry standard now. This is not something I just want to do on my own. This is something that is very involved within the community. It was also fascinating to see how this impacted if people were going to stay with their current employer or not. So more than 60% said that they stayed with their current employer because of the volunteering support that they provided. So one thing you hear, not only that we have, you know, a shortage of talent, is that we also have a revolving door as far as good talent coming in and then quickly leaving. Being able to go to your employer and say, I would really like to stay here, but I would also like to be more involved in the community. Let's see how we can develop a plan where I can have some time off. Maybe you might want to get involved with this as well. But then we also asked how many would move to a new company if that company provided support for volunteering. 97% said that they would move to a new company if that company provided more than 25% paid time off to be part of the community volunteering. So again, interesting statistics that you can have in your back pocket as far as talking with your employer. Don't beat them over the head with it, but educate them. Let them know, hey, this is the industry standard right now. This is how other companies recruit and retain their strong talent. And, you know, going to that point, so what would be some of the key things that you would look for from one of your employees to make sure that you knew of their involvement in volunteering? How would you want that presented? When would you want that presented? And what were some of the key things you would want me to tell you?
Early on, and to all the points that Kathleen made previously, and a lot depends on the size of the company, but for better or worse, your involvement in these events, you are representing your company. One way or another, people are going to know who you work for. And so your employer needs to know. Most companies that I'm familiar with are supportive, but your best approach is going to be to go through your chain of command and say, again, explain, these are the events I'd like to attend, these are the roles that I hope to play in them, this is what I hope to gain. Because you're exhibiting, again, passion for the industry, a passion for learning, and a desire to continue to grow. Now this is anecdotal. It was not as large a pool as the CyberSec jobs survey, but when I was with Coalfire, we did an internal data analysis, and what we found was our attrition rate for people who participated in the community was lower, significantly lower than it was for our overall staff body, and also performance evaluations were higher. And in fact, we instituted a program where we put in a little point system. So participating in events, it could be in events. We factored in new certifications, all that good stuff. But we had a point system established. So by attending, you get X number of points. By participating as a volunteer, you get Y number of points. By presenting, you get Z number of points. So all of those things factored in, and this is for your bonus potential. And what we found is that accelerated the curve of those other positives, performance evaluations and lessened attrition. So all of what has been presented here, I can tell you anecdotally, in a pure cybersecurity services environment, is true. And employers are increasingly aware of it. But if you can go in and explain what you hope to gain, why you're attending this particular conference, it goes miles to getting things done.
Because one of the things that we all think, we think that our con involvement or being involved in the community, we should not be sharing with our employer. Really look at it as a partnership. You can leverage your partnership with your employer by letting them know that you're part of the community. I can't tell you how many conference organizers I've talked to, and I said, did you ask your employer to sponsor? Resounding no. And it's really interesting, I've found within this community that people want to separate church and state between what they work at. I'm seeing a nod in the background. Did you ask your employer to sponsor? You did? And he did. Great. So this is it. This is more about showing your passion for the community, showing your passion for your professional development, but also engaging your employer in all that process. So just sort of the key takeaways from this, from the survey and from community volunteering. Obviously networking, as I said, number one way to find a job is to have someone refer you in. Building skills, you may think that you're technically proficient, but if you have to be on the content committee, reviewing the agenda, you might find out more about what's going on in the community than just reading what you see on your flip pad. Positive impact on the community. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say my soul is being eaten. Well, believe me, the people who are part of cons don't feel that way because they are giving back and they're feeling that fulfillment. And also, it's really a very important thing to have other experiences to be able to share during your interview process and during any kind of job search, because you're always going to want to expand what you're doing. Your job might not always give you the challenges that you're looking for. So if you're part of the CTF and you're part of building that crypto challenge, or you're part of something else within a panel discussion, you're constantly going to be challenging yourself to new skills and new experiences, and that is how we keep growing in our career. From a company standpoint, obviously a way to retain top talent. This is a way that you can keep the attrition down, definitely keep the retention up. Being able to get out there and build the employer brand. So many of the companies that I know that come to my company and say, help us find candidates, my first question is, what's your employer brand all about? And they're like, we have really great advertising. I said, no, that's not the answer to my question. What is your brand? How are you perceived in the community? How do people, when they look at your logo, do they go yay or do they cringe? That is what can be changed around by being part of the community. Support professional development. We all know how expensive it is to get certifications, to get training, but there is no certification or training out there for soft skills. So this is what you're looking for when you're looking at professional development through community volunteering. And also knowing that getting to know the community and building your long talent pipeline. Being able to say, I don't need 6 pen testers right now, but I know the conference that they're part of. I want to be part of that community so that down the road I can tap into it. Or did I give all of your secrets away, Matt? Yeah. If you want to see the survey to be able to quote it to your boss, it is on slideshare.net/cybersecjobs.com. We also have another survey up there on job search challenges. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming here early this morning. Do we have any questions? Oh, come on. Someone's going to have a question. Yes?
So the night of the volunteer dinner, that would have been a great venue to talk directly to most volunteers. We're out there volunteering right now and can't be in here. Something to...
Well, it wasn't part of the, mission to be able to submit a talk during the volunteer dinner. But it is, I started volunteering more than 35 years ago. And I've always volunteered in a variety of different roles, from founding organizations to, just being the marketing. It's always a really great way to be able to give back, but it's also a really way to challenge yourself in a good way. Not, some of us may like climbing walls or doing, gladiator or something like that. That's not something I'm going to do. But if I find an organization that has a really poor brand or has a really poor marketing, or their con isn't very well organized, I might walk in and ask them if they need some help. It's definitely a way that makes my overall life more fulfilling. How about you, Doug? You volunteer in different ways.
That's it. I mean, we're not just one thing. We tend to be defined by the jobs that we do, and it's very easy to get caught up in that. But we are all complex beings, and you need something more than just your job to feel fulfilled, to get out of bed in the morning excited about what the day holds. And this is a wonderful opportunity to combine the two, to further your career, to grow your professional experience, but at the same time do something that just makes you feel good. And you don't get that opportunity every day. And one thing I would add, just because it's come to my attention a little bit fairly recently, if you're lucky enough to present, then very often it may be recorded. And you can provide a link on your LinkedIn profile to that presentation. If you haven't had an opportunity to present, but you've got something you're working on, podcast it. I wouldn't recommend you put the first one up on your LinkedIn profile. There's an art to the podcast. But if you can put together something, even if it doesn't necessarily get accepted at a con, and present it yourself, and once you've honed the skills to present well, then it's something you can link to your LinkedIn profile, and it gives people, it's a living resume. It's a living, hey, that was brilliant. You got a new tweak on a PowerShell script. Now again, making sure your employer, is aware that you're doing this, and it doesn't impact anything that that's proprietary to what they do. It's a great way to advertise yourself.
Thank you. Mandy?
Yeah, I just wanted to share something. So I want to talk about the health benefits that come from volunteering. This may not be something that you think of very often, but I personally volunteered my whole life, pretty much, but I always volunteered 40 to 200 hours a month, and I viewed it that volunteering was my vocation, and whatever supported it and allowed me to do that was my avocation. And that way it was like the money, the career, the certifications, they kind of came along naturally because of the networking. But then I had major health issues, and I spent years in hospitals and nursing homes. What's funny is that because of volunteering, while I was in ICU or while I was in acute care and all that, I had, over a period of about, let's say, the first 6 weeks, there were like 125 different people that came to the hospital to visit. And there were men in suits that would come to visit. I wasn't capable of talking or seeing them or anything like that, but the register, the nurses kept lists of who came. And I didn't know until I'd been in the hospital for months and months that because there had been so many people that came and there were nicely dressed guys, apparently the hospital staff thought that I was some kind of real estate heiress. So they were giving me even better care than what they would have naturally. Whenever it turned out, really all I had was what was in that hospital room. Everything else was gone and lost. But so it was the friendship, the niceness, like you do get, I think, even in just your interacting, you get joy and a heartfelt satisfaction. But it then turns into like these people become your network for when you hit hard times or whenever where your employers and your fellow employees aren't on the same level.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. You're going to make me cry. So that's it. I do apologize. I have to be in Northern Virginia by 1:30. So Doug is going to take any questions afterwards while I quickly wrap up.